Okay, I'm going to try something different this time. Um, Robert Scottalero's new book is a book of all triptychs, and he may show up and may not. He's not feeling all that well, but I'm going to read his first triptych in the book. And if you would all mute, that would be wonderful. Niagara Falls, high stakes. Picture a man of average stature and looks, seated beside a woman of average stature and looks on a flight to New York from a small Midwestern town. Picture him telling her he's a high stakes mogul on his way to put a bow on a deal involving an entire block of buildings, what he'd like her to imagine as skyscrapers. Picture him dressed, not as a real estate magnate, but more a poor pig farmer on his way to church. Imagine him opening the small bag of peanuts delicately, as if he's unlocking the secrets in an ancient scroll. See her looking out the window down at shapes of land, sculpted by distance into manageable puzzle pieces, saying, "It's so beautiful." Wisps of clouds pass over and grow denser as he leans over her to look. Also in a single peanut lands on her lap and her dress on a print of an elegant flower, ever so slightly faded, only a bit out of season. "Wow," he says, "cool." And the word "cool" flaps around for a moment like a fish on a rock. Picture her watch with an askance glance as the peanut rolls to the floor. Second one, broken ice. Picture an inexpensive hotel in the city with an ice machine in the hall that no longer works properly. Picture them after a misshapen moment when he fumbles with a condom, puts it on backwards. Imagine what was empty space between them remaining so. Picture a TV on, a bit past the foot of the bed, an overzealous commercial announcer's voice, like a madman's mantra they hardly hear. As she tells him she was once the Iowa State ice skating champion. "Gosh," she says, "the trophy was so big you needed bodybuilders to lift it." Even though she ice skated only once in her life, on a frozen lake, her brother fell in. The sound of the ice cracking at first, like cubes in a cold drink by a microphone, then thunderous as he crashed through. Some men forming a linked line, lying on their bellies to relieve him. Lying on their bellies to retrieve him. How that was the first and last time she wore skates. Picture how easily the words leave her lips, spill out like a falls, not Niagara, but her Niagara. Picture him saying, "Wow," without the cool this time, looking at her teeth. Imagine him thinking how a retainer when she was young would have spared her that overbite. And the third one is spring-loaded. Picture them going to Coney Island the next day, digging their feet into sand, listening to the monosyllabic sea shanties the gulls are singing. Picture them watching the tide come in, go out, with the belladonna eyes sea-absent Midwesterners possess when confronted with such wet, wavy vastness. He has a dental appliances convention to attend early the next day, and his mind is meandering as a small cyclone might. He needs to call his wife. Imagines telling her of the wondrous new materials they've come up with for night guards. Picture the woman beside him, digging those skate-phobic feet further into the sand, to the cool spaces where the sand darkens. Imagine her thinking of her husband back home with the kids, thinking of the dull neckties he wears, mulch brown and dull end of autumn greens, always on crooked, how she straightens them on the way to church, how they always go back as if spring-loaded, crooked. How can she wait to see that Broadway play with her younger sister who moved to this hulking town? Imagine her thinking how badly the man beside her smells, never taking a shower afterwards. Imagine her recalling how he looked up at those skyscrapers reverentially, as if they were holy, poking halfway into heaven. Some magnet. Imagine him turning and hoping she'll smile so he can see her teeth again. Picture her gazing at his open shirt, at his undershirt on backwards and inside out, at that little twisted label. Imagine the silence between them like a tightrope, slack and greased. Picture the gulls overhead getting every word right, the tide getting every word right. That's the great Robert Scottolero, our friend Scotty. Thank you for indulging me in doing that. And
Paul, Bernice is trying to get in. Bernice is trying to attend.
in that case, I will. Is Tracy Mullins here? No. Sudha Balagapal is honored to have her writing featured in many fine literary journals, including Smokelong, Split Lift, and Craft. Her highly commended novella in Flash, Things I Can't Tell Anna, was published by Ad Hoc Fiction in 2021. She's the author of a novel, A New Dawn, and 2 short story collections. Her work is listed in Wigleaf Top 50, 2019 and 21. It's forthcoming in Best Microfiction, 2022. Sudha, you're up.
Thank you so much, Paul. All right, I'm going to read a little piece that was published at Craft, and it's called Little Things I Hug Huge. The way Appa held the sponge-tipped brush of white shoe polish. The way he ran the snowy viscosity over my scuffed canvas shoes, on top of the laces, around the eyelets. The way he placed my shoes under the ceiling fan to dry because rain lashed outside. The way I wore my brilliant pair to school on race day. The way he stomped on the brake pedal with his big toe enclosed in the chappal's leather loop. The way he threw an arm out so I wouldn't hit the dashboard. The way the chappal's strap dug into his skin. The way I scooted all the way back in the passenger side seat. The way he frowned because my black shoes fit loose. The way he used a pair of scissors to pierce an extra hole on the buckle strap. The way he rubbed cooking oil on the shoes to soften them. The leather abraded my ankle. The way my footwear sat snug. The way I nagged him for high heel shoes from New Delhi. The way I wore them every waking moment to appear taller. The way he asked, shoulders in a wiggle, if he should nail the sandals to my feet. The way he shook his head when a heel fell off. The way I ignored him teeter-tottered on the cobbler's feeble repair. The way he smiled at his first pair of sneakers, my gift when he visited me in the US. The way he'd slapped the bottoms of the shoes after his walk, releasing debris before he nestled the shoes inside the box. The way I clicked my tongue at his saved box. The way he struggled to tie shoelaces. The way he loved Velcro. The way he mailed me the outline of his shoe on paper. The way I take him a pair each time I returned home, gray, not white as instructed, to obscure grime and stains. The way I watched him test shoes, rocking heel toe, heel toe, heel toe. The way his breath hiccuped when he saw the newest pair. The way the sneakers stayed in the box, balled up paper stuffed inside the shoes to help hold shape. The way he shuffled inside the house in his flip-flops. The way he placed them next to each other facing the bed. The way the slippers stayed while they took him away. The way I nested them with the shoes inside the box. Thank you.
Very good, Seda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea Marcusa's work has appeared in Gettysburg Review, Cutbank, River Styx, River Teeth, Citron Review, and others. She received recognition in a range of competitions, including Glitter Train, Raleigh Review, New Letters, and Southampton Review. You're up, Andrea.
All right, so I have a couple of pieces, but I think it might be too long. So is there a time amount that we're supposed to read?
Maximum 10 minutes.
Maximum is how many?
10 minutes.
Oh, I don't think that this will take that long, but I'll time myself. How's that? Okay, so this piece I read a bunch of months ago, but it's greatly changed, and I thought I would read it again because it just came out in Ellipsis, and I just think it's a fun piece. So it's called Leaving a Mark. After her husband Brian calls her toxic and walks out for good, Crystal cleans. She dumps stacks of his mail and papers into a huge black trash bag, including his car registration, the one 2 weeks ago he claimed he'd thrown out. His accusation had kept her from sleeping, and at 2 a.m. she'd risen to hunt for the paper and found it stuffed in the back pocket of his dirty jeans in the hamper. She'd woken him and shoved it in front of his sleepy eyes. "What's wrong with you?" he growled and pulled the cover over his head. She moves to a shelf stuffed with his diet supplements, collagen, vitamin D, resveratrol, fish oil, selenium, and hurls them into the bag, then seizes the things he's left lying around and dumps them. Running shoes, tennis racket, Android phone chargers. Brian disapproved of iPhones, said they were for lemmings. "It's passive-aggressive bullying, harassment," he'd say when she demanded he pick up his bathroom towel, flush the toilet, put the cap on the toothpaste, rinse the tub. Crystal didn't see it this way. She thought he was a thoughtless slob. She sprays cleaner on the clanking radiator again, allowing the fierce smell of the ammonia to soak in and destroy any remaining vestige of her. The radiator under which a month ago she discovered a pair of scarlet panties, a tacky adolescent style with a tiny gold key on a chain. The crotch was crusted with groin funk. He denied knowing anything about them, but she could tell when Brian lied. His voice grew insistent. His eyes widened and struggled not to blink. At the medicine cabinet, she tosses his old acne cream, the patchouli aftershave that made her sneeze. The pot gummies and Viagra are gone. She scrubs off the toothpaste from the sink splashboard. It was a pink vegan variety that splattered each time he brushed his teeth and sang along to Final Countdown. Later, she crawls into bed exhausted, but sirens awake her. They're far away, but their sound always scares her, and she feels across the sheets for him, her flesh not yet caught up with her mind, then shakes herself fully awake. She remembers her sister Janet's words the day he'd left, and she'd driven to her home and cried like a 6-year-old. Janet spiked her tea with whiskey, handed her a tissue, and said, "You'll be a lone penny knocking around in that place alone." But Crystal thought she'd feel better in her own place. Now she's not so sure. She gets up, switches on the bathroom light, and uses a scrub brush to lift up the tub's deepest grout stains and turns them white. They almost shine back at her. 2 man-sized yellowish-brown footprints ruin the tub bottom. She runs the shower. Its sound reminds her of their early days, when Brian would take her under the spray, his arms encircling her, water cascading over them, and he'd lift her into him. Afterward, he'd dry her with a soft towel and rub her feet, even her toes. She'd prepare his favorite smoothie with kale before kale was cool. She turns off the shower, leans over, scrubs the footmarks harder, squirts soft scrub, something he'd never let into the home, too toxic. They don't budge. She rinses away the cleanser. The stains look worse than ever. She studies them and wonders if it isn't Brian who's toxic. Perhaps all the supplements she downed, along with his sweaty feet, had seeped into the tub finish and eaten it away. She pours on straight bleach, waits, scrubs, rinses, and the fumes send her into a coughing fit. Her shoulders ache, her hands bloom an angry chapped red. His foot stains remain. She opens the battered window, the one he'd promised to fix and never did. The flakes of peeling paint drop onto the sill and blow on the bathroom floor. Cold, damp air fills the small space. Outside, a chilly rain pours down. She imagines him sleeping on his back, his hands folded neatly under his head, wonders if he thinks of her, wonders if he's relieved to be rid of her. Maybe she was too needy, demanding. She stops herself. Why is she blaming herself when he was cheating? She splashes warm water on her face and tearing eyes, washes the cleanser off her hands, and then spreads jasmine-scented lotion on her rough fingers. It's her favorite scent. It reminds her of Sicily, where she purchased her first bottle. She holds the back of her hand to her nose, inhales, imagines the azure Mediterranean, the winding paths where she picked fresh rosemary that grew like weeds. How happy she and Brian were then. But there'd been signs. After she'd spent weeks researching and then made the itinerary listing of important historic sites and cathedral visits to visit, they'd spent the first 2 days sightseeing, but then when they arrived at Capo Gallo, he'd announced that he wanted to spend the rest of their vacation at the beach. Crystal looks at the tub, its filthy footprints. She'd gone to Palermo alone for the day, and when she returned unhappy because she'd missed him, he criticized her. "Why do you always need me there to hold your hand?" She held her tongue, never spoke, dismissed it as his jet lag talking, but it had hurt. There were so many other times too. She realizes she was always recovering from something Brian had said to her. Hot, angry tears flood her eyes and cheeks. He was a lazy, sloppy, selfish son of a bitch. I ran around like a crazy creature trying to make it work. None of it mattered. She places her feet on the footprints. The marks are huge and wide, like giant bear paw prints. She stomps on them as hard as she can. Her heels spark with pain. Every morning when Brian's feet thudded on the floor, the whole apartment trembled and shook her awake. She thinks about that sound, how she awoke each morning with a shudder. And then he left, took a few things and left the rest for her to handle like a heap of trash. She looks back at the tub. those huge feet. She knows now, though, that if he had stayed, she would have been crushed.
Thank you, Andrea.
Then I think I'll move right to, I'm going to skip this next one because I want to read this other one. This, and I don't think I've read this before, but I'm losing track. This is called Feast, and it just appeared in Heavy Feather Review. The double wide steel doors clank shut. I stand next to a man who collected me from the waiting room. We're the only people in the huge elevator. I am naked except for my thin gown. The man barely looks at me. He rolls back on his heels and digs his hands into his khaki pockets. His pants hug his firm backside. He's tall, big-footed too. I open my mouth to say something, but he's already speaking. Here, put this on. He hands me a blue scrub cap. On my head, I slip it on and look down at my gown, cinched at my waist, right above my belly button. They promised I will have a flat stomach. Nothing will show above my bikini line. Sexy. Uterusless. An empty space at my Qigong energy gate. What will my bladder think, left there all by itself? Or this fit guy next to me with snug pants and oomph? The doors open, and I follow after him. We round a corner and then another and enter a long hallway. Why are you making me walk there? The cement floor feels cold on my paper-slippered feet. Hospital policy. Health patients feel more in control. I get it. The hospital is making me walk to my execution. It's not that bad. An execution of my uterus. It will be a perfect execution. No hysteria anywhere. We reach a set of doors. He opens it for me and holds it until I pass through, then strides ahead. I hurry to fill the gap between us. Are we almost there? Just about. Hey, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Recovering from this. Happy Turkey Day. You? I'm going to my mother's. She's having a big crowd. You know, my cousins, my nephews, my brother, my sister, her boyfriend. All from a uterus, one without cancer cells. Once a cozy home for my two fetal boy tenants, who are now so grown, they've each married women with their own. Pink, healthy ones. A typical uterus. I thought I had a typical one until 2 weeks ago. Always when you least expect it. For most of the world, next week will bring a typical Thanksgiving with all the fixings. Today, once they clip, slice, and pull out that uterus like a baby, it'll be just like closing up a turkey without any stuffing. And there's the vaginal cup that they'll sew where the cervix was. Will it be French or button? We arrive at a room. Glass double doors slide open. I'm handed off by the man to a gowned and capped woman. I blink in the bright white and break out in goosebumps. The woman double checks my name and birth. I imagine a smile under the mask. Or maybe it's just her eyes that smile. Is it possible for eyes to smile? I want to think so. Sorry it's so cold, says the woman as I hug my bare arms. Another mask pats the gurney. Sit here, put your head there. I lie down on the narrow court. You're this morning's race car, making a pit stop. The masked voice says as it pulls a sheet over my torso and down to my slippered feet. Soon they'll be working under my hood. A half dozen figures scurry around like every second counts, sticking and strapping things on me. There's a loud whirring. Have I been set in motion? When will I start counting backwards, or is that only on TV? Everything looks blue under the glare, the room, gown figures, caps. Something rubbery hovers over my face. I think of the Tex family, passing gravy, sweet potatoes, pouring wine, slurping soup, spooning stuffing from that gaping turkey cavity, carving that gutted bird. Thanks.
Andrea, thank you very much. Karen Schaber's Revest flash fiction appears in 70 international literary journals and anthologies. She is editor of the award-winning flash fiction anthology, The Group of Seven Reimagined, contemporary stories inspired by historic Canadian paintings. Schubert curates Vancouver Flash Fiction, an online resource hub, and Miramachi Flash, a monthly literary column. In her spare time, she's a seasoned family therapist.
Well,
Karen, I have a question for you.
sure.
Are you coming out with another edition of your Group of Seven?
No, it was only done to commemorate their 100th anniversary in that year.
Okay.
Wish it was, but no.
Okay.
The conch shell roars. The Cessna Grand Caravan 12-seat seaplane circles a tiny speck in the Andaman Sea on approach. Heinrich watches the sky flare into magenta, scarlet, and saffron as dusk closes in. The island flanked with sands the color of Carrara marble and warm azure waters should exhilarate, but instead his heart sinks. There is no pleasure to be had here. It has been 10 years since his last visit. The familiar fragrance of cashew trees permeates the air over the gentle murmur of waves. A towering vertical mass of limestone marks the way, and Heinrich begins the final leg of his journey via longtail boat. A sea of spray rushes ahead, foretelling of his arrival. He and Astrid loved to come to this paradise. She came for the snorkeling, spellbound by the colorful corals and displays underwater, and for the Titian triggerfish, hawksbill turtles, blue spotted stingrays, the fabulous little nudibranchs, all within arm's reach. He for the stunning panoramic views above, the sea shining like glass beneath the cerulean sky, where he would while away the hours beneath the faint rustling of palms, reading. Astrid loved sea life, even after she waded out of the water limping up the beach, leg dripping with blood, a long tentacle wound around her waist and thigh, its tiny stingers fiercely embedded in her skin. She would stop to look with fascination at the peacock blue man-of-war bubbles resting on the sand, their intense inky color alluring. Heinrich adored Astrid's adventurous and playful impulses. He acquiesced, of course, when she had wanted to return yet again to this paradise. He had suggested they go back to Lord Howe Island in the Tasman Sea. Each dawn they had been greeted by a blue-breasted fairy wren vocalizing at the window of their bungalow, every pristine vista otherworldly. But they had many opportunities ahead, and one year here or there, they would still cover everything on their bucket list. The longboat pulls up alongside the dock at the moonlit bay. Tiki lights stand like sentries flanking the path along the beach up to the main compound. The air eerily still and quiet. The beach empty, save for memories. Heinrich drags his feet. His flip-flops catch on nothing, but he stumbles nonetheless, releasing a cry too absurd and overblown for the tiny misstep. Grief, like a heavy blanket, drags along the sand. He smooths down the edges of his ghost white linen shirt, now untucked. Strands of silver and gray at his temples curl softly. His hand brushes the wayward wisps to the side, winding the longest unruly curlicue behind his ear. Bending down to pick up a pink conch shell, he rolls it in his hands, feeling its weight and heft. He clutches it to his belly, loud like sorrow. There is nowhere to run. Astrid disappeared here, the tsunami pulling her down deep, never to be seen again. Heinrich raises the conch to his ear, listening for her roar. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I was in the water visualizing all of the sea life in your reading. It's one of my favorite places to be. Lynn Mundell is co-editor of a 100-word story. Her fiction chapbook was just published by Emasi. Lynn.
Hey, everybody. I don't know if Scotty was able to come, but I thought I would read a piece from my book. It's one of my triptychs. Scotty was actually one of my first flash fiction friends. I was at a big party and I was very socially awkward, and Scotty came up and talked to me, and we've been friends ever since. I just love him. So this piece is called The Story of Three Metals. Silver. Thimbles, cups, and vases, silver treasures tumble from her bed when she wakes, raining on the floor, flooding the room. Last night, Farhad rode hard across the desert, 100 warriors in pursuit. His saddlebags bulged with stolen silver coins. He was so close, she could see his green eyes, hear his rich laugh. Their arrows hit his back just as he entered the gates. He had always said he'd bring her fortunes beyond her dreams, and he had. In her sleep, the coins bought all the beautiful things in the world, but their price was too dear, each vessel empty. Gold. Night stands guard as she fills a water sack. Layla stuffs her pockets with pistachios. They race down marble steps, past slumbering camels, the deserted bazaar. They have never gotten this far before. Where are the guards? Each night as Etienne is sated, sleeping between them, she imagines golden sand burying his heavy body, filling his mouth. Now they sprint toward the gate left open with their coins, but quicksand forms beneath them, a charm, a curse. Etienne in his golden robe is the last thing they see while drowning. He glares like the desert sun, furious, impossible to escape. Bronze. Her brother said she was as ugly as a gecko. That was why men stared, sighing as she passed. You are shameful, Sibi said, and he hammered her a scowling mask of bronze that scorched her face. But the men moaned, brushing against her breasts. Your body is hideous, Sibi said, fashioning a bronze chest plate. She staggered under its weight while the men howled and rubbed against her backside. I must hide all of you, Sibi said, forging a bronze suit. In it, she became a fearsome warrior, her bronze body growing green as the hills of unconquered lands. That story is, I lived in Iran when I was a kid, and so it's my interest in the Middle East, and then I love fairy tales too. I thought I would read one short, second and last thing, one short piece that was just published in Ghost Parachute. It's a little light and more fun, I hope. And it's called Move On. It started with a clanging wall heater, but every office had that. It was an old building, and I was becoming an old proofreader. Moving on soon? The designer asked after I'd been there 7 years. What's next? Asked the office manager. Nothing, I'd say. Nothing's next. On my 10th anniversary, marked with a birthday e-card from the senior editor, the moaning began. Move on, move on. At first, I thought it was a joke. It sounded like Barbara, the print buyer. But soon the moaning was just white noise, and I was equally unfazed by the levitating page proofs, and later still by the flickering lights. It was an unusually hot day in my 16th summer when the ghosts appeared. There was the little man with the visor and sleeve garter who nonetheless had ink all over his cuff. There was the lady behind all the moaning who was clutching a dictionary of the English language against her well-bone corseted ribs. And then there was the old guy whittling a wooden typeset block with a scrimshaw knife. I knew why they were there. It was a sort of professional intervention. Move on, they moaned together. Move on. I didn't. I wouldn't. Instead, I welcomed them as kindred spirits. They'd float around my office and we'd bicker over what to hyphenate or debate the series comma or whether internet should be capped. I always won. They didn't know what it was. On hot days, I'd walk back and forth through the cool, misty vapors. On cold days, we'd gather around the heating duct and moan, spell check, piping it into the other offices. 22 years soon, huh? Said the associate manager of social media. But it wasn't phrased as a question. When we lean into change, said the SVP of Digital Content Strategy in an incomplete sentence. I saw them shiver from the cold front created by the ghosts following me around the building. I read their frosty body language as I blew deadlines with my corrections in Google Docs. On my 25th anniversary, I finally accepted my pension, the present of my old wooden office chair, and my colleagues' gag gifts. These included a grubby turkey feather, perhaps meant to be a writing quill, a styrofoam stone tablet and chisel, and a t-shirt made by the interns that said, "Colons go before all of your shit." It was late when I left the building for the last time. I stopped for one final look back. The ghosts waved their watery hands from my darkened window. When I paused a moment too long, they made shooing motions with their hands that said, move on, move on. And I did, and I will. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lynn. Meg Tweet's latest collection is White Van. She's author of 5 story collections and 5 chapbooks. She won the Twin Antlers Poetry Award for her poetry collection, Bare Bulb Swinging, and is included in Best of Small Press 2021. She teaches writing, retreats, and online classes hosted by Bending Genres. She is also the fiction editor of Bending Genres and associate editor of Narrative Magazine. She's also a wonderful teacher. Meg.
Thank you so much, Paul, and hello to everyone. It's so great to see everybody and hear you. So I don't know how to put it, but heartbreak of Roe versus Wade, I'm going to read something that I wrote a short while ago in a chapbook to start, called Lined Up Like Scars. I was standing in a deserted aisle of candy and dolls at Albertsons. My niece wanted a doll. I wanted candy and not to buy a doll, but it was her birthday and there was no in our relationship. She was 7 years old, lived in another state. She had my number. You need to quit your job, she said when I picked up the phone. Okay, I said. Come over, she said. You know, I wish I could, but I'd have to get on a plane, I said. That's okay, planes are all over the sky. They come here all the time. Just tell your boss to finish the work. I need you at my house. I have games. But what about school, I asked. Oh, that, she said. Yeah, that. I was a Smurf in a play. Well, that's cool, I said. Were you blue? What do you think? she asked, as if I was an imbecile. Listen, there's a plane flying over the house right now. Run and get on it. I'll see you at lunch. The screen went blank. I sighed. She would always be disappointed in me. Her mom was Abby. She wants an American Girl doll, she said. I could hear the capital letters spelled out by Chinese manufacturers. Any special kind, I asked. You know she loves you, Jess. Whatever you get her will be a winner. Just make sure it's an American Girl doll. They have names. Don't get her Carpetina or Isabel, though, she added. She already has those. Loving you. Got to go. The screen went blank. I sighed. I stared up the line of plump doll faces behind cellophane inboxes. They all looked into a future without bills or wrinkles, although I hoped some kids might decapitate them and cut their hair. I thought of suicide. How would I do it? I'd always imagined a noose when the subject lodged in my head, but had no idea how to work a knot and saw myself knocking over the chair, hanging for a moment, and then crashing to the floor. I couldn't even tie a bow on a birthday package. The dolls pouted and beamed as though they would punch out of those cartons singing show tunes. Twirling batons, ready to parade down any pageant runway with a smile and a wink. Blondes, redheads, brunettes with blush bleeding cheeks, dimpled and grinning, as wide as a family portrait. Not one of them slouched bitter nails or took antidepressants. Their star-spangled blue and white eyes were flags full mast, blinded by no shadows. Can you really see them? Someone to my right asked. I turned, thankful to see a person there and not a doll out of its cage. I thought this was a good time to remain silent and see where this movement of hers would take us. Each one of those precious faces was a baby once, she said. Aren't they magnificent? I flipped off the switch in my head that said, get the fuck out of here now, as my neck squeaked on its hinges. I leaned toward the woman for a better look. She was light years away from any planet, with a thin, chalky face and floating dark circles like oil slicks under her eyes. She was 80 or she was 30. Either way, she was an artifact from another time. Look at that one, she pointed up to a box. You never think of clinics killing babies, but they do. She hummed like an elevator when her eyes settled on mine. You got any kids? No, I said. She smiled. You're a collector like me then. She nodded her head, which I noticed had bald patches painted in with what looked like black shoe polish. Did you know they molded each of these faces from a dead child? I saw babies falling from the sky like a colony of locusts. I started thinking about suicide again. That one, she pointed up at the same box again with a brunette inside named Hildegard. That's not her name, she laughed. Hildegard, she smirked. Does she look like a German to you? American Girl dolls made in China with German names. I wondered what it would feel like to cut myself. Lots of girls were doing it. They even bought special knives and wore long sleeves. It was as common as getting tattoos or doing heroin. The lady's tiny body elongated. Her shaky white hand clawed out of her red sweater and pulled Hildegard down from the row of unblinking faces. "Here," she said, and handed me the doll. "This is Teresa." I took the package, crinkled sound of empty lives, emergencies that didn't know if they were life or death, the smell of licorice and years forgotten. "Teresa," I said, "what a beautiful name." The pale lady smiled and closed her watering eyes. "She was an angel," she said. Teresa stared up at me. Her fat German arms pleated with splayed beige fingers for something I could never deliver. I saw babies dunked in plaster of Paris. My cell phone blasted Nirvana. The lady and I were both a bit unnerved. "Sorry," I said as I answered. "5 planes have flown over my house and you aren't here. Why?" my niece asked. "Are you still working?" "Mom said you need money. I've got tons in my cash register. It's all set up. Hurry." The screen went blank. $400 for the operation, I whispered. The doll, detached and tense, spit brown-edged curls out of drilled holes in her colorless scalp. The lady patted me, eyebrows a memory, and the withered wisp of a mustache dusting her quivering lip. "If you keep them in their packages, they're worth a lot more money someday," she said. I nodded, smiled, watched her slippers slither down the aisle before I started dialing. That's it.
Perfect, Meg. Thank you.
Should I just end on that and say, okay?
Svea Serling is the Brooklyn, Mass Poet Laureate from 2017 to 2020. She's the editor of Muddy River Poetry Review and the editor of 10 by 10 Flash Stories. Zvi.
All right, thank you, Paul. I'm going to read 2 short ones. The first one is called Every Day. Every day, Kaminsky, not that one, the other one, recites poetry at the corner of 8th and 7th, shouting castigations of everything political and social. You might wonder how 2 streets, sequential in number, had their own corner. A good question, since the mystery remains unanswered. Each day, Kaminsky carries a small book bag with a strap over the shoulder, and at precisely noon extracts sheaves of white paper with handwritten poems. Seditious, some say, maybe criminal, while others think they are incantations to aliens from distant planets, or worse, signals to an unseen enemy. At precisely 12 noon for 1 hour, he reads his poems. I don't know how that happened. He reads his poems. I lost my place, I'm sorry. At precisely noon for 1 hour, he reads his poems at the top of his voice, shouting in the direction of people leaving stores or walking on the street. He stands at the corner of 8th and 7th, removes the handwritten poems from a book bag, clears his throat, sips water from a plastic bottle, and begins reading. People stop on their way from their office, others to the welfare office to pick up their checks. Maybe they just listen to the rantings and say he's a madman escaped from the asylum. One day, a man in a gray suit stands and listens for a few minutes, then yells at Kaminsky as an anti-government agent trying to recruit them and shoots Kaminsky dead. Every day, someone stands at the corner of 8th and 7th and reads one poem from a blood-stained sheet to honor a madman who never harmed a soul. The other, am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, there we go, sorry. The second story is called Russell's Hookers. In the 1990s, I was teaching in Belgium and had an apartment at the corner of Avenue Louise and Rue Dotzenberg. I often strolled down Avenue Louise to Stephanie Place, to Louise Place, to the Grand Place, where I ended up in an alley at Chez Leon restaurant. I ate there 3 times a week, feasting on mussels and Belgian beer, then nibbled some delicious Belgian chocolate, the 15-minute walk back to my pad. At the corner of Avenue Louise and Rue Marcellus, the hookers, usually 3, solicited their wares. I always said hello, going and coming back, but never availed myself of their services. Actually, they were all men wearing lipstick and rouge, clothed in female attire, appealing to Arabs, fat men, and desperate others. For a few euros, the customers got to drive and park in shadows of abandoned warehouses. The 3 on the corner had their reason. The tall Turk needed money for rent and art supplies. The skinny Asian wanted to earn fair home. The black from the Congo worked his body so he could feed his friend who drank wine and watched porno movies on the telly. Once in a while, a car stopped. The driver lowered his window and in French asked how much for the hooker. They agreed on a price. The hooker rented the car and they drove off. This I observed so many nights as I walked the streets. Sometimes on my way home, they were gone. All these years later, I still wonder if they survived or if they met their goals or if they are still beckoning on that corner. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Spee.
Thank you, Paul.
Paul, I'm so sorry. Can you let Cindy Rosmus back in? Her Wi-Fi went down, but it's back up now, but she can't get in.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sharon Mesmer's poetry collection, Greetings from My Girly Leisure Place, Loof Books 2015, was voted Best of 2015 by Entropy Magazine. Other collections are Annoying Diabetic Bitch.
Go ahead, say it.
It was on the next page.
Oh, I thought you didn't want to say it.
Oh, there's nothing I won't say. Don't worry. The Virgin Formica, Half Angel, Half Lunch, and Vertigo Seeks Affinities. Chair Asia, translated into Romanian by Paul Dorfumuglu, published by Karamades in 2021. 4 poems appeared in Postmodern American Poetry, a Norton Anthology, 2nd edition, 2013. Fiction collections are The Empty Quarter and An Ordinary Time from Hanging Loose, MRV Yanago from Hachette in French translation. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, New York Magazine, the Paris Review, and American Poetry Review. She teaches at New York University and the New School. Shirley,
Thanks, Paul. I thought you didn't want to say the word bitch.
trust me, it was on this next page.
Okay, I'm just going to read 3 poems. They're very short. And before I read, I just want to say I'm really glad to be here. The readings have been just amazing. I've been making a lot of notes, but I'm not stealing lines, I swear to God. Okay, so I'm going to read 3 poems, and they're from a new collection, which is called Even Living Makes Me Die, and it's dedicated to underknown women poets of the Americas. And we probably know these poets, but they're not as well known as they should be. And the first one is called The Poet's Decalogue, and it's after Gabriela Mistral. Chile, 1889 to 1957. 1. Be always conscious of your wings. Darkness is overtaking, churning, and even tension is tired. In the house of keeping still, all is hollow-eyed and groaning. 2. Shiver and tingle outside the automobile. Grandma is on life support. The nuns and nurses found her and called you a wanderer. They know nothing of your wings, or do they? 3. Disrobe. The holiest were often required to be naked. Under the dome of the winged serpent, all was stillness. In those days, the sun door stood open, and all of creation flew through it, in radiant rounds of joy. 4. Is your chimney warm? Is the air in it warm and the air in your room? Is your hearth redolent with the scent of flesh? If so, fan the flames to produce a cooling jewel. Use this jewel to scry only the most necessary knowing. 5. Make a pilgrimage to the mountain of butterflies. Love descends on those defenseless. 6. The ocean-born virgin is nicknamed Fishy Smell, but her real name is Bird. Find her in the neck of time. Her vagina is enough. You don't need the legs. Remember that initiation takes a lifetime and transpires purely by accident. Soon, a triangle of morning light will come pouring through the porch. 7. Take the mantle of an earth-colored insect and make a wand with twigs and leaves. Use it to replicate the cunning beauty of certain corpses. In the end, your face should resemble a luminous apricot-colored cloud. 8. Soon you'll stall. Your coverts will beat to no advantage. You may choose to sacrifice your happiness to restore what was lost, but the sacrifice itself is a privilege. How long will it take you to forget this? 9. Everything that torments and suffocates, everything that imparts sorrow and despair, is the moving water that turns the wheel, that transforms air into tree, into prayer, into air. Breathe deep. Make scribble pictures of the stain on your ceiling and try to sell them. Very few will buy. 10. Now recall the glory of your wings. And this is, it's called To Sharon Mesmer, and it's after Julia de Burgos, 1917 to 1953. This poem was not written by you, Sharon Mesmer, white woman whose name means complainer of insomnia. This poem was written by me, Julia de Burgos, whose name means my eyes are filled with the graves of stars, and that's why I can fly. Who am I? Don't you know me? Well, when God asked me who I wanted to be, and I said, someone who loves peacefully, God wrote down amnesiac and pushed me out of baby heaven like a blank pushes a blank out of a blank. Fill in the blanks, Sharon Mesmer. I've already done all the work. What, you're still wondering how I got inside? Still wondering why only one of us can fly? Well, keep in mind that when you write a line like, no one loved me, but I had wings, we both know you're trying to sound like Mary Oliver. I know because I never tried to write myself into a position involving career advancement or even happiness. I am no mere witness to inertia. I know that heaven kills and hell transforms a witness to inertia into an embodied form of joy for all eternity. At the same time, I'm no angel. I'm not even a filthy pigeon. What am I then? I am the scaled fish writhing, still alive in your hands, my wild eyes pleading with you to blank. You know what to do, Sharon Mesmer. Start with feeling the constrictions of those sticky wings. And the last one I'm going to read is called Privates of the Popular Apocalypse. And it's dedicated and it's after Lori Jackson, 1962 to 1990. I didn't die young enough, but I am coiffed and wired on broken linoleum, trying to describe this existence to an afternoon of wheelchairs. Your finger seating me like dragon teeth, my clavicle bruised in freight yard dusk, a parenthesis of grease on the ceiling of the Y. So what if it's true? The clavicle is the body's only long horizontal bone. And the stuff a young girl does to make a man a hero cuts a low keening moan amid the moon and ablutions. But hey, weren't we discussing linoleum, the ceiling of the Y, bald, bright July? And would it hurt to fall asleep as the coach house smolders, my face all twisted, but recognizably me? Thank you.
Sharon, that was terrific.
Thank you.
Roy Dorman is retired from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Benefits Office and has been a voracious reader for over 65 years. At the prompting of an old high school friend, himself a retired English teacher, Roy is now a voracious writer. He's had poetry and flash fiction and a number of online and print journals. Unweaving a Tangled Web, recently published by Hecate Publishing, is his first novel. Roy.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here. I got two short flash pieces. The first one is Alibi Incorporated. The dame who walked into my office didn't quite fit the bill. Oh, she was dressed to the nines and had a face to die for, but she had a fistful of hundreds in one hand and a 38 special in the other. Most of my clients keep their cards a little closer to the vest. I need to have been someplace else this morning, she said. I didn't tell her, but I had that very thought run through my mind every day for the last 2 years. Most of the bars are still closed, but I suppose I could set you up at a gym. I deal in alibis. Somebody does something they shouldn't have done and don't want to pay the price for it. I set them up with an alibi. I've got a string of staff on retainer in a variety of businesses who ain't afraid to take a perjury rap. Now, I don't have Alibi Incorporated stenciled on the glass of my office door. That would be dumb. My business cards and my tax man say I'm a licensed private dick. Alibis are just one of my many services. I also do ID changes, relocations, motel room photography, and all the other sleazy gigs that come with the private dick territory. Don't you want to know what I've done? She asked, all wide-eyed, still pointing the gun at me. Nah, that 38 tells me I'm probably be reading about it in the newspapers. In this business, the less you know, the better. I was curious as to why she was pointing the gun at me when she had the money clutched in her other hand, but I figured we'd get to that eventually. I called the gym, found out who was working this morning, and set it up. So here's the deal. The owner of the gym is Monty Schwartz. The trainers this morning are Herb and Lisa. You were there all morning trying the place out to see if you wanted to buy a membership. I took a head and shoulders shot of her with my cell phone and sent it to Monty. That's it? I lie, they lie, and you get paid for it? It's a living. And hey, don't forget about the part that you don't go to prison. As to my pay, how about you give me the gun and half the money you got there and we'll call it square. You probably don't want that piece anywhere near you when the questions start, right? How would I just shoot you and keep both the gun and the money? I already have an alibi. Smart cookie, ain't you? I like that. How about us going to lunch? I'll buy. Sounds swell, big spender. Then I'll have an alibi for this afternoon too, won't I? I turned the sign in the door over to closed and locked up. Smart, funny, good looking, and knows how to use a gun. I think this could be the start of something big.
Very good, Roy.
All right, second one, happy hour on Rush Street. If you need any help, just ask. I was in Chicago on business and had stopped at a neighborhood bar off Rush Street. I was sitting near to the woman I had just spoken to. Well, almost sitting next to her. There was an empty bar stool between us. I was reading one of James Lee Burke's early Dave Robichaux novels and had overheard an obviously drunk patron putting some clumsy moves on the woman. She turned to me, glanced at my book, and smirked. I can handle this myself, thanks. Hey, buddy, the drunk said, leaning around her. I wasn't talking to you. And I wasn't talking to you either, I said. I went back to my book. There was a punk rock mixtape playing and a band was doing a fevered version of Donovan's Season of the Witch. I think most covers usually fall a little short, but this one was pretty good. Other than the hipster bartender who was busy slicing limes, the woman, the drunk, and I were the only ones in the bar. Though the woman had acted as if I just materialized, I had watched both she and the drunk in the back bar mirror when they had each come in. In my business, I always try to know where everybody else is if I'm going to kill a little time getting lost in a book. So can I buy you a drink or do you think you're too good for me? No, you can't buy me a drink. And yes, I do think I'm too good for you. I was finding it hard to concentrate on my reading. I know a bar's a bar and not a library, but some background noises are easier to shout out than others. And it's hard to get a decent craft beer in most libraries. I closed my book, put my drink coaster on my beer, and headed for the men's room. After taking care of business, I returned to my bar stool to see another customer had drifted in. He was sitting next to the drunk, and our eyes met when he caught me checking him out in the back bar mirror. Another IPA, please, I told the bartender after finishing mine and putting a 10 on the bar. She drew my tap and set my change in front of me with a smile. $4, happy hour, she said. I put 2 ones on the rail for her and went back to my reading. The drunk had either given up or was planning new strategy. I wondered if the new guy might have told him to lighten up. The bartender was still standing in front of me. After checking to make sure none of the other 3 were looking at her, she cocked her head in their direction and rolled her eyes at me. I smiled and gave her a little, what you gonna do, eye roll back. She probably appreciated having at least one normal customer in the place in case things got hinky. And then things did get hinky. The newcomer mumbled something to the drunk. The drunk responded and was knocked off his bar stool. His head hit the floor and he was down for the count. New guy pulled a Glock from his shoulder holster and pointed it at the woman. You're Kate, right? He asked. My boss said I could find you here. He thinks he might be your next assignment, and he's not happy with that. Kate, if she was Kate, just stared straight ahead. As she was between myself and the new guy, he couldn't see me slowly reach for my SIG P225 compact in my calf holster. I was thinking Kate had been more than a little careless when a shot came from the purse she was holding in her lap. New guy fell back off his bar stool onto the floor with a bloody third eye in the middle of his forehead. I put my cig up against Kate's temple. Give the purse to the bartender, I said, slowly. As Kate started to hand her the purse, the bartender backed off a bit and shook her head. Not me, she said. I don't want it. So Kate, you probably weren't going to leave the drunk, the bartender, and me around as witnesses, were you? The bartender gasped and grabbed the purse. Take the gun, Mom. It's Allison, the bartender said. So Allison, take the gun out and give Kate back her purse. She's leaving now. I don't want her gun, said Allison, holding the pistol with two fingers like a dead snake. I'll keep it, I said. Can't have too many Glocks in our line of work, right, Kate? I'm Astrid. I think she's Kate, she said as she motioned toward the bartender. I had put my cig back in its holster. Careless, careless, careless. Allison, who was now Kate, was pointing the Glock at my face. You run quite a happy hour here at Fast Eddie's, I said to her, stalling for time. Well, this had been going on. The drunk had come to, and he was in a crouch near the bar stool where he had been sitting. Keeping low, he reached up and grabbed his gin and tonic. Hey, you, he yelled as he threw the glass at Kate. Kate had seen the movement out of the corner of her eye. She whirled to face him and caught the glass squarely on the nose. I reached across the bar and grabbed the Glock from her. Astrid was frantically searching for something in an ankle holster, but the drunk grabbed her by the wrist before she could get to it. What a den of vipers, he said. I hope I didn't screw up by putting all my money on you, buddy. Nah, you did good, I said. Go over there and lock the door. We've got a little routine maintenance to do before we get out of here. I'm George, he said, extending his hand. Johnny, I said, taking it. Let me work here for a few minutes. After commandeering Astrid's and Kate's weapons, I tied both of them up and stashed them behind the bar with the dead wise guy. I washed the glasses George and I had used and wiped down the bar. There, I said, it's like we were never here. Seems like you've been involved in this kind of thing before, said George. Never anything quite this strange, I answered. But in my line of work, I'm not always mixing with the best crowd. No offense, George. None taken, said George. I think you might have saved my life today. How about we catch a cab to Sid's Bar and Grill on LaSalle, and I'll buy you a couple beers. Happy hour, you know. Sid's happy hour as good as this one, I asked. It might be a little quiet for you, but I like it. I grabbed my book and followed George out the back door, leaving the front door locked. Kate and Astrid could do the remainder of the tidying up after they got loose. That's it. Thank you.
Roy.
Thank you.
Claudia Serra's poems and translations have been published in Field, New Letters, Prairie Schooner, The Puritan, Oxford Poetry, and elsewhere. She's the author of 6 poetry collections, most recently Writing on the Walls at Night, Unsolicited, Press 2022. Her poems have been translated in French, Italian, Russian, Arabic, and Farsi, and featured on the Writer's Almanac. Her collection of selected poems translated into Arabic, Tonight I'll Become a Lake into Which You'll Sink, was published in 2021. She's a founding editor of National Translation Month, serves on the board of the Red Wheelbarrow Poets, and co-hosts their monthly readings. Claudia.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here, spending your evening with our poems. I want to read a few pieces from my book, Writing on the Walls at Night. They're all prose poems, and it wasn't mentioned in my bio, but I grew up in Romania, and so I write a lot about Romania and mix it up with New York City, and here we go. The caterpillars. Glasses. The caterpillars kept me company. They lived in the 2 mulberry trees and munched on the leaves. At night, I heard their crunch and rustle until they crawled into my dreams. In the collective, Grandma felt the mulberry leaves to the silkworms. Time was fuzzy and spun days of raw silk. Nights were cocoons. The silkworms got sick and died in the summer. The caterpillars invaded the porch. The mulberry trees' purple blood stained the dirt beneath them. My brother and I picked the sulky mulberries from the ground and ate them, then spoke with black tongues. Once, instead of a mulberry, he swallowed a piece of black and glistening chicken shit. To this day, he feels very lucky. Luck is something you ingest or step into. Sometimes it's a beautiful woman wearing a flame dress and turning the corner, but most of the time, it's just a byproduct of pigeons. Make me lucky, mother, and throw me into the fire. And she did. Aunt Susie and the village. In the dead of winter, there wasn't much to do and no TV to watch, so I took up crocheting. I crocheted replicas of all the people in the village, of Aunt Susie, old man Gheorghe, my neighbor Lulu, my cousin Elena reading a crocheted book, the priest, the policeman, Baba Marina, the ghost from the cemetery, everyone. I crocheted their eyeglasses, headscarves, clothes, their cheeks and lips, their hair. I crocheted Aunt Susie's dog from brown fuzzy yarn and her flock of geese from feathery white and gray threads. And when Aunt Susie died, I crocheted her organs from bright red and brown silk and her skeleton complete with ivory teeth, floppy ribs, and soft phalanges. I crocheted her brain, ruffled and creased with all her cloudy yarn thoughts and convoluted synapses. I assembled her body on the dining room table, each organ nestled in a crinkly silk sack. The heart was the last to go in, knotted and intricate, with all the blood threads laced through the body. People said I had too much time on my hands, but what do they know? I told them, fate crochets us all the time with colorful threads. She links the day with the night, mother with child, spring with summer, with fall, with winter, and life with death. One loop, slip stitch, chain, turn, join 2 stitches, repeat. She drives her hook through my brother and me, and we both hang by a thread, then by another. Loop, stitch, chain, repeat. Fate has too much time on her hands. The way home. It was a strange, dilapidated city that looked a lot like Bucharest, but everyone spoke English. I was trying to find my way home, to find the subway entrance or a bus stop. You picked me up and drove through rusty rail yards, along mountains of dirt, mangled metal, and machinery parts. I was cold. You gave me your jacket and the poetry book about salamanders. I thought you wanted to save me, but you only wanted to teach me a lesson. Poetry doesn't save anyone, you said. It only messes with your head. In Herald Square, the Statue of Liberty has lunch with a Silverman. The copper robot tells them jokes from when he used to be golden. The statue complains that her feet hurt from standing all day. I wonder if she lives on Staten Island and takes the ferry home. I imagine her lifting her skirt over puddles and nodding to the other lady in the harbor. I wonder if the Silverman sleeps with a paint on, or if he showers, how the paint runs off his face like mercury, revealing a strange person in the mirror, how the bathroom glints in the moonlight and all the pipes shine silvery inside as he reaches for the towel. Only in New York. The White Rabbit rides a bike and stops at the traffic light. He wears black shorts printed with pursed red lips and drags behind him a sign for the Penthouse Bar at 250 Madison Avenue. In the sticky heat, I wonder if he has marmalade on skin under that fur. He looks at me as if he knows something I don't and clinks the bell. Just like us, the objects long to be together. The neckties hang out in Brooks Brothers windows. There's a conference of umbrellas in Bryant Park, a summit of Russian hats in Brooklyn, and a shoe party at my back door. Last night, I fell into the abyss again, and I wanted you to know how deep it was. So I counted the seconds, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, flying head down into the pit. When I got to 37, I knew I was too far to be saved. I left my home looking for a new city. After years of wandering, I exchanged my old cement city for a new one made of glass. The city of stray dogs for the rat city. The beggar city for the one of the homeless. The city smelling of urine for the one of piss. I walked the streets looking for the girl of my past, light-footed and happy as a bird. She's gone. The streets take me to the same squares, the same houses with the same closed doors. There is no new city. It's the same one, the one I carried inside all along. When I see the Black Sea again, the sea will also see me. She'll open her green eyes and greet me with white horses and hammers. She'll recite my poems. She'll welcome me in her cold bosom, smile with thousands of salt teeth, and carry my name from wave to wave. For I'm her lover, Ovid, the exiled. Signs, the end of the world is near, time to move to New Jersey. Mother and I walk through the woods and the woman with a twirling umbrella shows up, dressed as a clown from the Zamboni circus. She's telling me a message, but I'm distracted by her umbrella and I don't understand. A dog comes by and it's my little brother. I recognize his eyes, the way he looks at me. He's limping too, so I carry him home. Giant fires light up the sky. We're on the highway near my hometown and the hills are burning. In Times Square, Jesus is eating pad thai for lunch and a bunch of Elmos are joining the armed forces. A recent transplant from the ninth circle of hell chats with an old lady in the subway. She can't hear anything because Spider-Man is playing the saxophone. In the tunnel, someone detonates a teapot bomb by accident. Everyone runs by the sax player. In Bushwick, the local artist takes her peacock for a walk. The queen bee is walking tigers on Broadway on a golden leash. And my neighbor is walking a white dog named Noon and a black one named Midnight. He smokes and stops to pick up after them. He has a cat named Insomnia at home. At Starbucks, the latte costs $39. The barista is wearing a Putin t-shirt and a Karl Marx beard. He speaks with a strong Russian accent and writes Comrade Claudia on the cup. E.E. Cummings is eating a freedom omelette with freedom fries for breakfast. I pay for the latte and sit at a table with Lord Byron. He's holding a toy bus in his hand and says, God bless you. The walls are covered with portraits of Justin Bieber and Beyonce. On the black and white TV, Wolf Blitzer announces that Beyonce had just won the presidential elections. One should always ask, at the end of the world, what would Beyonce do? She'd move the White House to New Jersey. And I'll close with this one. What happens in the poem stays in the poem. Take a dream vacation to your beautiful pain. Enjoy its five-star hotels, fine dining, and dazzling nightlife. Find new romance under your heart's Eiffel Tower and play the penny slot machines. Slide your tokens inside the wounds and pull the handle until the three cherries align. Pound after pound of shiny poems will pour out. Don't delay, book your trip today. It will be the experience of a lifetime. Thank you so much.
Claudia, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patricia Q. Badar is a California native raised in the Port of Los Angeles area. Her stories have been published in Wigleaf, Smoke Lung Quarterly, The Pinch, Pithead Journal, and Atticus Review, among other wonderful places. She is a staff member of two journals, Smokeland Quarterly, and Baron Lit. Her story, Over There, will appear in Flash Fiction America anthology, W.W. Norton, March of 23. Patricia.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I'm gonna say yes. Oh my, I have butterflies, you guys. This story is called Getting Ahead. I was young and new to the city. This was in the days when job seekers circled postings in a special section of the newspaper. Excellent opti for self-starter. Gal Friday, AMs only. Exec cutie for fun sales department. I was early in my pastel suit and nylon hose. My borrowed shoes were loose, so I had to walk with care. Around me, worker bees swirled. Skinny bike couriers lightning bolted the streets, howling as they flew. The Hobart Building lobby was marble with a chandelier and a doorman. Between the two elevator doors was an ornate brass letter drop. I'd never ridden in an elevator alone before and had butterflies. But the ninth floor halls were plain, carpeted cheaply in green. Mrs. Foote was the boss's right-hand woman. Like me, she wore a suit. Her eyes were water blue and oozy. The sounds of her mouth seemed overloud in the quiet office. On her paneled office wall hung 3 bright Mexican amate paintings. You're aware this is a bookkeeping job? Her asterisk mouth twitched. I just finished a year in an office, reception, but it was a lot of lines. I took in the shag carpeting, the dark, larger office beside hers, the boss's, with a bare desk and an enormous butterscotch leather couch. And I sometimes helped out the accounting department. Mr. Foster likes to see young girls get ahead. I can see you're bright. She lowered her voice. The last one got herself in a family way. She asked how much money I wanted, and I said what I'd made back home. Mrs. Foote reached inside her pocket for one of those metal clickers. At its sound, a small, disheveled man appeared. He'd been there all along, hidden behind his office door. Mr. Foster. I'm a trickster and an entrepreneur, Mr. Foster boomed. He took in my shoeless feet, nylon sheathed hose half hidden in the two-tone shag. How about you start tomorrow? Mrs. Foote straightened. Very good, she said. The building's men and women's rooms were on alternate floors, so I took the stairs up. Afterward, I stood for a moment at the head of the stairs. Below me, Mr. Foster was exiting the men's room. The pink entertainment section jammed into his waistband. I took a step forward and one of my shoes flew down from my foot. He held it like Prince Charming, waiting. On the elevator ride down, I danced. Within a month, I'd be lounging around with this man, high on magic mushrooms, ordering Mrs. Foote to fetch calzone and cappuccinos for us downstairs. Mr. Foster really was magical, at least for a while. It was he who urged my new wave hairdo, the pointy Japanese shoes, the secret tattoo. When Mrs. Foote left to do our bidding, we pressed our hands like children to her amate paintings, watched iguanas undulate. The end. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Rasmus is a Jersey girl who looks like a mob wife and talks like anybody from the West Side Story. And noir, horror, bizarro stories have been published in the coolest places, such as Shotgun Honey magazine, Dark Dossier, Horror Sleaze, Trash and Rock, and The Hard Place. She's the editor, art director of Yellow Mama and the art director of Black Petals. She's published 7 collections of short stories. The latest, Backwards, Growing Up Catholic and Weird in the 60s, is available now on Amazon. She's also a Gemini Christian and an animal rights advocate. Well, kind of says it all, Cindy. You're up. But you have to unmute.
I also do a series about growing up weird in Atlantic City, the casino Atlantic City. And here's the latest story from that. It's called Predatory Peepers. Atlantic City, 1972. Beware, Mrs. Marshall, the psychic, had told Mom. A man with predatory eyes. Yeah, right, Mom said. Spread-eagled and dead, they found her in room 314, nude for that gold turban I hated. Cool sunlight made it shimmer as Jessie the maid opened the door. Jessie screamed. The creepy eyes was gone. Hotel guests swarmed the room, like the teen sisters, fat, bug-eyed Ramona and Melanie, who'd snatched Howard from me, sobbing wildly like it was their mom, not mine. Howard rushed over to Melanie, held her close. Nobody noticed when I left. Maybe I can't face death. When Aunt Millie's old chihuahua died, I cried for days. Cut the crap, Mom had said. It's only a dog. She deserved to die just for that. If only. He hadn't found Mom yet. In room 314 last, instead of next. In 313, Jessie had caught us. Howard nude, me in just underpants. I can still hear that laugh before her scream. We just got started, sucking face like mad. For the first time, I reached for Howard, lightly squeezed him. Damn the prude, he called me. Till today. Till today, Howard was the only guy that even kissed. 14 we both were, but we thought he was cooler. He thought he was cooler. For weeks, we'd snuck around while his dad, Mr. Hertzberg, booked sexy French-Canadian tourists. Wee-wees, Mom had called them, making out where we could like the ancient elevator or that bathhouse out back. Sour smelling it was, with sea green walls, like an underwater hell. Cold water, never hot, puddles everywhere. Do not, the sign said, in English and French. Crack sand into the hotel lobby. Still everyone did. When a bikini blonde walked in all sandy, Mr. Hertzberg's eyes bugged out. Beware. In the bathhouse, we'd met Ramona and Melanie, rinsing sand off their legs and feet. Ramona's were like an elephant's, but Melanie looked like a mermaid turned mortal. 16 she was, with red hair that nearly reached her perfect thighs. We're from Maryland, Ramona told us, like I cared. Waves were so big today, and I almost got hit by a jellyfish. Melanie and Howard shared a smirk. And that's how it started. If only, I thought, creepy eyes had got Melanie instead. Predatory, Mrs. Marshall, the psychic called that guy's eyes. I'd never seen hers as leopard print shades, hid them. Peepers was what Pop called eyes. Poor drunk Pop, always trying to be funny. Laugh or jump, he would say. Predatory peepers. Would Mom dead? Would Pop laugh for? It was hours since they found her. Now they'd be wondering where I was, maybe searching for me. Come and get me, I thought, curling up my legs on the bench. In plain sight, I was on the boardwalk, close to the steeplechase pier. Around me, a few people sat on benches overlooking the beach. Families were packing up umbrellas, flower towels, their kids still running wild. Beware. Roasted peanuts, I smelled, and popcorn. Yummy stuff from across the boardwalk. Howard's pretzel stand was outside Woolworth's a few blocks down. I remembered how the day we'd met, he was sticking dough in the oven. That's too much salt, I told him. I like too much, he said, smiling, of everything. He suddenly turned to pull me close. Even in glasses, he was the cutest guy ever, with sea green eyes I could drown in, and the curliest blonde hair. The time a customer came, my hands were filled with his hair. We almost kissed. Later in the lobby, Mr. Hertzberg flirted with Mom. That's some tan, he said, meaning where it ended. Thanks. She adjusted the lines, the ties, to show more cleavage. We were headed out to eat. My stomach growled so loud they heard it. Wow, he said, somebody's hungry. Smirking, Howard joined him, hopping onto the desk. In his hand was a paper bag. Want a pretzel? I had no appetite now. Did I ever again? A gull screeched, swooped down for discarded popcorn at my feet, and shot back up into the sky. Behind me, the guy's eyes drilled me. I sensed when he sat down. No smell like cologne or booze. Somehow I'd smelled him over peanuts and popcorn. Sweat poured down my back. If he'd leaned over and wiped it off, my heart would pop. Another screeching gull flew past. I felt him lean over, but before he could speak, I jumped up. Headed my way was Ramona. It was the fastest I ever seen her move across the boardwalk, looking right at me. Finally, I ran away from her and that monster behind me. Past tourists strolling before dinner and kids chasing pigeons. Past the steeplechase pier with teens screamed on sissy rides. I ran till my legs almost gave out. Pamela! Into Mrs. Marshall I'd ran. Her old bones almost cracked. I caught my breath. She's dead. He nodded and gripped my arm tightly. Behind those cat sunglasses, she was seeing something I couldn't. Something horrible. She shivered, I did too. Go back to the hotel, she said. On leaden legs, I trudged back. Knowing each step brought me closer to a grief I never knew I could feel. I hated Mom, but loved her too. In her own way, I think she loved me. Each step brought me to a new life I didn't want. A chance to kill Pam the prude. It was dusk when I got back. Too early for the cocktail lounge to be mobbed. Mostly because a guest was found dead. Still, the jukebox was playing. Baby, baby, don't get hooked on me. Thanks, Howard, I thought. Soon I would cry over everything. Now something was dragging me out back. I had to go to the bathhouse. Inside it was almost dark, but the cold water was running like someone was rinsing off sand. Predatory peepers. In a puddle of sandy water lay Ramona, eyes wide, unseeing. She'd saved my life without realizing it. Searching for me, she was the one grabbed. If only Melanie had looked for me instead. Sighing, I shut off the water. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And closing out the show is our birthday boy, Bill Merkley, who has to unmute.
Thank you, Paul.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thanks.
Happy birthday, Bill.
Thank you.
On me. The drinks on me, Bill.
They arrived. Oh, okay. This is from a novella in Flash that I'm working on. I wish it was happier, but here we go. It's called I Can't Tell You Why. I think you should be here, the caller says, and I'm out the door. I've never spoken to Jesse before, but Henry has told me about his sister-in-law, and he apparently has told her about me. Henry and I had stopped getting together for taping sessions, or anything else for that matter. The book we were working on no longer came up in our brief phone conversations. I'd ask if he needed me to bring him anything. He'd say the nurses were on it and that he just wasn't up for visits. Now Henry is unconscious under blankets on a rented hospital bed. His studio apartment has become a hospice, heavy with the aroma of coffee and candles. A small Latina nurse leafs through magazines on the couch at the far end of the room. Jesse says he's been like this all day. We take turns at the bedside, holding his hand, stroking his hair. He's so much thinner. Kaposi lesions show through his waxy complexion like submerged stones. I try to give Jesse some privacy by sitting with the nurse. When it's my turn to sit with Henry, I tell him it's okay to let go. His breathing changes, longer exhales, further apart. This is it, I say. Jessie stands beside me. Her eyes plead with Henry to say something, anything. The nurse looks at Henry, then at me. You've seen this before. You know. Yes, I say. Now it's Jesse urging him to let go. We tell him we love him. The breaths come deeper, the time between them longer. Jesse takes his hand. A deeper breath, a long exhale. Stillness. The nurse places fingertips on Henry's wrist, then on the side of his neck. She pulls back the blankets, searches with her stethoscope. She gives a subtle nod. Jessie collapses onto me, sobbing. She radiates warmth, almost a fever. I hold her, whispering what is always whispered in such moments. And then, divorced from any thought, before I have a chance to change position, I have an erection pressing against her. We part without comment. Jessie looks at the floor, says her husband is on his way. I grab the phone and call a couple of Henry's friends in California, recruit them into an impromptu phone chain. I sense they know it's that call by the hesitation when they answer. Phones ring a little differently when it's that call. Ben arrives and Jesse holds and kisses his face. He goes to his brother, stands with his hands on the bed rail. He bends to say something I cannot hear, kisses Henry's forehead, says he has no idea how to reach his parents. He thanks me for being there. I hug him and get out. What the actual fuck? In the darkness of my Mustang, I turn the ignition halfway as if I might find answers in the dashboard lights. What is wrong with me? What is Jesse telling Ben? I conjure some bullshit about heart rate and blood flow and life asserting itself in the face of death, and I am so sick of my own thoughts. Then I hear Henry's voice call it Morningwood, and I laugh until I cry. I wipe my eyes, start the car, turn on the radio. More Than a Feeling comes on, and I turn that shit off. If the universe was paying attention, if it knew anything at all about Henry, it would play some Poco or Eagles or Moody Blues. I drive in silence with the windows open. The lights are off when I get home. I don't touch them. Ignoring the liquor cabinet, I slump on the sofa, kick off my shoes. Strips of cold streetlight fall across the bookcase, illuminating the ghostly stack of cassettes Henry and I made. There was so much more to talk about. There are promises to keep. Upstairs, my wife is in bed. I shed my clothes and climb in behind her. I whisper, he's gone. She clings to my arms as they encircle her, then turns toward me with welling eyes. We are heartbroken and scared and alive. We fold into each other to summon magic and joy from the holy dark. Thank you.
Bill? Terrific.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. This was a great reading. I appreciate all of you. And I hope I'll see you all again.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for-
much, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for doing this,
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Paul. This was awesome. You guys were great.
You.
And happy
That was
birthday,
beautiful
Bill.
reading.
Thank you.
Lovely to see everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Woo.
I got to get you up here.
Bless you.
Thank you. I thought I was on mute. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Bill, have a drink on me after that.
Working on it.
Okay. Good night, all.
Good night.